Good Saturday morning to everybody, and welcome to HyperFit MD radio show. Along with Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin, I'm Gary Byron. Well, gang, how are you? Good to see you.
Good.
How are you?
We're good.
How was your week gone? Was it busy? I mean, we're in October, and wow.
Well, we've been away.
Yeah.
We were in Malta taking care of some family business for Francesca's family, and we expected to miss fall. We were amazed. We got back, and the trees hadn't.
No.
Down in Southern Connecticut, anyway, trees haven't really even started yet.
Not really here neither.
Yeah.
Lots of green out there, which I like.
Yeah.
You know, I hold on to the
Taking
summer
its
a little
sweet time.
longer, right?
Yeah.
Of course, the temperatures at night are a little different, but
Right.
That's to be expected. Otherwise, everything all right. How's business?
Who knows? We've been gone.
That's right. You just got back. You
That's
literally
right.
flew in yesterday, right?
Yeah. So,
Oh, my goodness.
We'll see if it's still there when we get there. Yeah, everything's fine.
Well, that's
Everything's fine. The cool thing about present day technology is that you can run a business from 3,000 miles away. You know, it's pretty remarkable.
Everything remotely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It's pretty wild.
it is. Yeah.
Hey, you know what I thought we'd get into this morning is something called regenerative therapy. I know that you know what this is, but
Sure.
for a lot of people who have heard the term but may not know exactly what it means, maybe we can start with that. What is regenerative therapy?
I guess the name is intuitive in the sense that what regenerative therapy is about is different kinds of therapies using components from a person's own body to achieve healing. So in general, that's basically what it means. It became really during my surgery days, as you know, I was a surgeon for 35 years before we opened this practice. Regenerative therapies kind of came into the fore 25 years ago, in the field of healing chronic wounds. Regenerative therapy is used a lot in wound care clinics and stuff like that. But then it's broken through into the fields of orthopedics and the kind of stuff that we do and so on and so forth. So it's really, when you're doing regenerative therapies, you're really surfing the wave of new science when it comes to things like wound healing and stuff like that.
What kinds of problems are you treating more specifically?
Okay, so you've got a diabetic, let's say, with a bad leg wound that he's had it for months and months and months. It's going nowhere. Treating that wound with platelets, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Treating that wound with platelets along with other topical therapies, as well as things like hyperbaric oxygen. Hyperbaric oxygen is a mode of regenerative therapy that supplies. One of the reasons a diabetic has a chronic wound is because of loss of microvasculature or micro blood supply to that wound. And if you're hyperoxygenating their blood, you're delivering oxygen to that wound, and you're helping that wound to heal. There are other body tissues that are amazing in terms of helping people heal. Let's say osteoarthritis. Regenerative therapies are great for things like healing tendon injuries, stuff like that. So it's really it's one of those things where, you know, once, excuse my sniffing, I have a little fall stuff going. Yeah. It's like anything, you know, like the MRI is a classic example. When they invented the MRI 20 years ago, now they're still inventing new indications for it, okay? Same thing with regenerative therapies. We're finding different ways that these kinds of therapies can be helpful with things like chronic wounds and chronic osteoarthritis, chronic tendon injuries, those kinds of things. Yeah.
What else? Anything else you can think of?
Well, let's say you go to your orthopedic doc with a tendon injury, okay? Tennis elbow. You got tennis elbow. You've had it for months. It's not going away. You've been to physical therapy. Nothing's happening. And now, still, what he's likely to do, or what a physician is likely to do, is inject it with what? Steroids, right? He's going to take cortisone. He's going to inject it. Now, he injects that cortisone with lidocaine so that when you go out of the office, you're like this. You go, oh, my God, I feel so much better. Then the lidocaine wears off. And tomorrow, you feel like somebody hit that elbow with a hammer. Then over a period of a week to 2 weeks, it starts to feel better. Now, the thing about cortisone is that it is a very strong anti-inflammatory agent. So the reason you feel better is because it tamps down inflammation, because what's going on with that tendon is you've got chronic inflammation going on there. It is not a healing element, okay? In fact, it stops the healing of that tendon in its tracks, because what's the first stage of healing? Inflammation, okay? If you're killing inflammation, you're stopping in its tracks the first stage of inflammation, of healing, which is inflammation. And why can you only get 2 cortisone shots into the same tendon? Because it's quite destructive.
Per
as well.
year or ever?
Pretty much forever. Although you can go back to it after a prolonged, that's a very good question. You go back to it after a prolonged period of time and do it again. But it is fairly destructive to the tissue itself. So it's really not a healing. It's about cutting down inflammation. What regenerative therapies do is, in total, and we'll talk about the details, but in total what they do is they initiate the 3 stages of healing. So if I take platelets, you know what platelets do, right? Platelets initiate the clotting cascade, right? What do? They're the first ones in a wound, and they do what's called degranulation. They just come apart like a cheap suit, and they leak their guts all over everything, and that starts the clotting cascade. Now, you can clot without platelets. It just takes a lot longer for that to happen. But also what they do is they release into the bloodstream what are called cytokines, which are chemical messengers. These chemical messengers initiate the healing cascade. And what's the first step in healing? Inflammation. Step 2, and what they do is they call down all these cells. Inflammation, they call down all these white cells to the wound to cause inflammation. White cells clean up garbage. They carry off that garbage to the liver for detox. Step 2 is now you've got fibroblasts down there laying down collagen. What does collagen do? It knits the wound together, right? Stage 3 of healing is always neovascularization or new blood supply. So rather than shooting cortisone into something, which is destructive in the first, makes you feel better, but is destructive in the end, what you're doing is you're initiating healing in a situation where you've got no healing going on there at all. So regenerative therapies in general, all about that kind of thing. Basically using the body's ability to heal, engendering the body's ability to heal itself, okay?
What are some of the elements then of regeneration therapies?
But we talked about platelets, stem cells, which are known as pluripotent cells or mesenchymal stem cells. Stem cells are the cells in the human body that can pretty much become anything. All of your blood vessels are lined with stem cells. They're just hanging out, waiting for something to happen.
Like what? Like what are they waiting to happen?
Like us. We do in the office. We hang out, wait for something to happen. A wound, let's say. A wounding, let's say. Or an acute infection, okay? Something like a bad urinary tract infection or gallbladder attack. Stem cells play a role in all of these things because when they are messaged to come to a specific area of inflammation, and then they're called pluripotent cells because they can kind of become whatever cell they need to become to continue the healing process going on. So the way I look at it is, if I poured a foundation and then I put all the elements it takes to build a house on the front yard and then emptied out a bunch of carpenters, you can get that house built. But if I empty out that truck with a bunch of carpenters and then a car pulls up with a general contractor, your work's going to get done a lot better, a lot more efficiently, so on and so forth. And the stem cells are the kind of general contractors in a situation like that. There are also elements of regenerative therapies known as exosomes, which is a really touchy point with me because exosomes is a word that's being thrown around a lot.
I hate when that. I've been hearing that everywhere.
Yeah.
Exosomes.
Have you really?
Oh
Well,
man.
I thought you were kidding.
No.
Yeah.
Why? Why am I hearing that everywhere?
Because a lot of it is garbage science. A lot of it is we don't know what. All right, what's an exosome? An exosome is literally a lipoprotein, a part of a cellular membrane that is circulating in the bloodstream. And in real life, what they do is they carry messages from cell to cell. Okay, exosomes are kind of messengers that cells utilize to send messages to each other. Exosomes, for instance, are critical in the the immune system to alert killer T cells, all the cells that are important in the immune system. They're talking to each other through exosomes. But trying to utilize these exosomes in a therapeutic way, there's a lot of noise going on. People are marketing exosomes. The FDA is getting really touchy about the whole situation because there's not a whole lot of science behind it. I saw an advertisement on Instagram, an esthetician in downstate Connecticut advertising exosomes is the newest thing. And I'm saying, like, for what? And it was just a word that she threw out there to market her program, to market her to market her clinic. But by the same token, in what way are exosomes going to be used in an aesthetics clinic? I have no idea. Yeah, well, that's the kind of thing. I mean, basically, what exosomes do is what we've already talked about. We've talked about these cytokines, chemical messengers, and in terms of extracting useful data that is going to tell us whether or not these things work, it's really not been done yet. And yet, it's become a marketing tool for a lot of practices, and the FDA is really clamping down on it in a big way. So we're just kind of waiting. As far as the exosome science is concerned, we're kind of waiting for the science to catch up with the hype, basically.
Going back to the elements of regenerative therapies, how do they work?
We talked about basically the way we've kind of already talked about it in the sense that, for instance, it's been, if I tell you that if by injecting, all right, let's say you come to me with osteoarthritis in your knee. Okay, osteoarthritis, bone on bone. Mm-hmm. Basically, you lost the cartilage in your knee through just overusing it, okay? What's happened in that knee is it's chronically inflamed. So that the chronic inflammation in that knee, your body's desperately trying to heal it, but the chronic inflammation that's going on in that knee is crossed over with your body's ability to heal it to the point where you're getting kind of continuous low-level destruction. And what happens? You go to your orthopod and he says, well, live with it until you can't live with it anymore, and then we'll replace your knee. But we want you to temporize because that knee replacement is probably going to last about 15 years or so. If you do it at 40, you're definitely going to need another one by the time you're 60, and so on and so forth. If I take stem cells and inject those stem cells into your knee, they will initiate, again, they take that chronic inflammation and it switches over to acute inflammation. All the new elements of healing are called down to this area. You get inflammation, then you get collagen deposition, and you get new blood supply into the area also. The lie about regenerative therapy and the lie about stem cell therapy is it creates new cartilage. It doesn't create new cartilage. Basically, what it does is it creates a nice layer of collagen in those areas. So you have a nice cushion again. It basically greases things up so that the knee feels better, but it's a healing process. So the whole process takes 4 to 6 weeks. So I inject stem cells into your knee, and I send you off to physical therapy, okay, because we want you to see a physical therapist for gentle physical therapy to distribute that product throughout the knee joint, okay, and then get the ball rolling. And typically you'll notice after 3-4 weeks that things are feeling a little bit better. 6 weeks, you're back doing stuff again, so on and so forth. So it's pretty remarkable how this stuff works.
I guess it is.
Yeah.
Wow, just listening to that it sounds fantastic. What are some of the sources of platelets in stem cells? In other words, where do they come from?
Platelets are easy. We just take your blood, we spin it several times, and there's a lot of places out there. What you've heard probably about platelet-rich plasma. You need to be careful about it because there's what's called quick spin platelet PRP and real PRP. Quick spin PRP, they basically just spin your blood once, suck off the serum, and give it to you. There are some platelets in there, but what you really need is platelet-rich plasma, where you are spinning it several times, and you basically, let's say your platelet count is 100,000. That would be a low platelet count, but let's say for the sake of argument, it's 100,000. By the time we're done spinning it, you've got upwards of 1 million platelets per high-power field in that serum. And then we inject it into whatever ails you, whether it's a tendinous injury, whether it's a bony injury. We use platelet-rich plasma in our erectile dysfunction clinic as well. So the platelets are easy. Stem cells can come from several different sources. Our practice, we have the infrastructure, but we don't do it yet to take your stem cells. There's lots of practice who will suck out some of your fat, derive stem cells from that. You don't get a huge quantity of stem cells from using fat. And if you're using, taking the fat from a 70-year-old, you have senescent 70-year-old stem cells there. They don't work very well. A better way to do it is to take your bone marrow. And again, you're processing that bone marrow. We don't do it right away. Right now, we don't use bone marrow because taking bone marrow is quite painful. There's typically either anesthesia or sedation involved if you're doing it the right way. So we don't have really the infrastructure to do bone marrow stem cells, but you can get a good quantity of stem cells from bone marrow. What we use are fetal stem cells. Fetal stem cells are taken from the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord has 3 vessels in it. It's got 1 artery and 2 veins. Surrounding those blood vessels are the connective tissue that holds them together. That's called Wharton's jelly. And Wharton's jelly is filled with pluripotent stem cells. And so this Wharton's jelly comes from moms, C-section infants. Moms are told about it. They're compensated for it. What you're using is product that's going to get thrown away anyway. It's basically it gets burned. What's the word I'm looking for? Thank you. Thanks, man. It's getting incinerated. So it's stuff that gets thrown away anyway. But the moms are compensated for it, and it is processed just the way you would process blood, for HIV and all those other things like that. And it comes to us in a small quantity. We get it in 1 cc or 2 cc increments for the most part. It's very rich with stem cell product. If you were to plate this Wharton's jelly in a growth medium, you wouldn't get much in the way of growing stem cells. What you're getting is the product that is in those stem cells, which does all the things that we've been talking about so far.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Things you learn on this show.
Yeah.
Folks, you are listening to HyperFit MD radio show, where age management is always at the center, along with Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin. I'm Gary Byron. You can, of course, contact Dr. Charles Guglin. Really easy to. Check this phone number out. It's really talk about an easy phone number. I don't know how you got all these 7s in here, but it's 203-890-9777. 203-890-9777. Of course, he's online at hyperfitmd.com. Going back to the sources of platelets and stem cells and so on and so forth, what can you expect in the way of results?
You can expect, depends on what you're using it for, number one. Depends on how much in terms of the PRP, the quality of the PRP, how it's processed, so on and so forth. You can expect some pretty good results. I have a woman in our practice who came to us. She'd injured her Achilles tendon, for instance. She'd been to several different clinics. She'd had cortisone injected in there and so on and so forth. She'd been offered an operation to kind of scrape it, which she wasn't interested in any kind of operation. When on physical exam, she had this huge lump in her Achilles tendon, which was rendering it very difficult for her to flex and extend her foot. And it was very painful to the touch. And with platelet-rich plasma, what you do is what's called a field block. You anesthetize her ankle so that she doesn't feel it, and then you take her blood, spin the platelets, injected it around and a little bit into that tendon, send her out to physical therapy, and 4 to 6 weeks later, she was back running on that running on that foot again. I put. Did we put stem cells in Tammy, or did we put platelets?
Platelets.
Yeah, my sister, who has bilateral osteoarthritis in the knees, we put platelets in both of her knees. And about 6 weeks later, she called me to complain. I'm like, "What's up? It didn't work." And she goes, "No." She says, "My knees are feeling great. Now I got all these other pains I wasn't paying any attention to." So in terms of results, I would never guarantee results from this. Okay, the data from our own clinic tells us that the results are really good. Some patients don't respond very well. You have to do what you're supposed to do after the fact. You're supposed to do your physical therapy. You're supposed to take it easy for those 4 to 6 weeks, give things a chance to heal. Compliance is a big issue because people are raring to go a lot of times, and it kind of stops the process. It depends on what you're using it for. Now, in different places, they do what are called wellness injections, where they're actually taking stem cells and just giving. Now, it's illegal to give your own stem cells intravenously, so they're giving intramuscularly stem cells. The government right now has made it illegal. You can use a person's stem cells, but you're not allowed to manipulate them, okay? In quotes, manipulate them. Manipulating means, basically what they're meaning is you can't grow them in culture, okay?
Oh, okay.
It all comes from this weird this weird confusion with cloning and stem cells, I think. I don't really know. But manipulation basically means culturing them, because if you can go to a clinic and have your stem cells taken, you can ship them off to Costa Rica, let's say, or Panama, where in clinics there, they will culture your stem cells. So you send down 1 million stem cells. 6 weeks later, you've got 2 or 3 billion of your stem cells. You go down there and they inject them. And some people talk about it like it's a miracle. If you got like aches and pains and lots of other issues, stuff like that.
You're miraculously cured.
Yeah. Mel Gibson had this thing on TV where his dad went down to one of these clinics. His dad was wheelchair bound, had osteoarthritis and all sorts of other things. And he went down there for a wellness injection of his own stem cells. And he came back walking around, cognitively better, so on and so forth. So Gibson is a big proponent of this kind of thing.
How long does it last?
If we inject your knee for arthritis, you can expect it to last 1 year to 18 months, for the most
So
part.
every
It's not
year to
permanent.
18 months, you've got to go back down there.
Probably, yeah. Now, as far as that is concerned,
Yeah.
I have very little experience with that. We tried not to make huge claims for this stuff. But as far as these wellness injections are concerned, you're really not allowed to do it here in this country. So the results would be the claimed results would be kind of spurious.
Do you ever see that law being changed?
I would love to see it changed. It will change medicine forever if they do it.
Why? Then what's holding them back? Is it the whole cloning thing, or
I think it's an ethical thing.
does it
It's
open
got
up like Pandora's box, where once you
sure.
start, then that's going to...
religion and politics, it's one of those things. So I think, I have very little insight into it. I'm just kind of waiting
What
for
if
it
it's
to happen.
regulated? What if it could be used to relieve pain, but not used for cloning?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not talking about cloning. I'm talking about simply just culturing these cells so that they do what they do anyway in your body, which is just divide and make more stem cells, okay? When you're talking about cloning, you're talking about something completely different. I think it's the confusion of those two to a certain degree that makes it difficult for the FDA why it's sanctioned. But I think it's coming. I think it's a coming thing. We have more and more data that shows that this approach works, and people are going to start to asking for it. And once the public starts crying for something, things move along a little bit more quickly.
Can they be repeated?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you can have repeated. That's what I think, as far as we talk about orthopedics, in terms of the sweet spot for this is that period of time between the time your orthopod tells you, well, let's, keep working until you can't work anymore, and then we'll replace your knee. This is really a sweet spot for this kind of therapy because you can prolong that period of time for a long time.
It's too bad that the American Medical Association they couldn't get lobbyists to really work on some of our national politicians down in D.C.
Yeah, well, Medical Association, American Medical Association isn't a great lobbyist for new things. They're
really
yeah,
think you think that if there's any advantages of living in the modern era.
Yeah.
People can complain about, back it was much more easier and in simpler times, but except for the advancements in medicine, and treatments, I would think that's where the AMA would want to.
Well, the AMA is really mostly about acquiring and maintaining people's access to what's considered standards of care. Okay, this hasn't worked its way into the standards of care realm yet at this point. It's a shame. But,
typically, but it's already, wow, I'm a little surprised because typically I would think it would take Oh, but it's already been out there a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
been out
already
there for a
been.
while. Sure,
Exactly. So how much longer could it possibly take then?
We'll see. Hope during my lifetime.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm.
I'm an old man.
I'm getting to that. Yeah, I mean, do you think it will be in our lifetime?
Yeah, I do. It's there's plenty of data that's been accumulated. You have to make believers out of people. Okay. We've talked about in the past in this on this show about confirmation bias. This whole concept that the first thing that you learn about something is the thing that you retain forever. You have to attack those confirmation biases about these new therapies, and you need to convince docs who've never been trained or have no experience with it that it is something that works, that it is something that is a viable alternative. Now, another aspect about this is that insurance doesn't pay for it. Okay, so it's quite pricey, and you have to convince the insurance companies that they're going to pay for it, because I think probably the average, Americans are beginning to understand they have to spend some part of their disposable income on their health care. Okay, I think they're beginning to tumble to that idea, but all this stuff costs money. All this stuff, and it's right now it's a cash-based business because insurance doesn't pay for it, which is a big problem, It's always the first question, isn't it?
All right, so in order for it to be approved, maybe we got to talk to the insurance company. It always starts with the insurance company.
Sure does.
Money, follow the money. Money rules everything.
That's right. Randy Newman was right. It's money that matters.
That's right. Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Oh, folks, you are listening to HyperFit MD radio show where age management is always at the center. Let me give you some ways in how you can contact Dr. Charles Guglin. First of all, I would say I always start with the website. Number one, it could answer a lot of the questions that may have already come to mind. But, of course, it's a double-edged sword because that could also provoke new questions.
God forbid.
But start here. It's hyperfitmd.com. Once again, hyperfitmd.com. And by the way, if you've got a question that you'd like to have answered right on these very airwaves, don't be shy. Email us. Or I should say email the doc here at cguglinmd. That's CGUGLINMD at hyperfitmdamc.com. And once again, his phone number, if you'd like to schedule an appointment. And for so many reasons that we've discussed on some various episodes of this show, all having to do with age management, give him a call at 203-890-9777. Once again, make that appointment today. 203-890-9777. For Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin, I'm Gary Byron. Thank you so much for listening to HyperFit MD radio show. Until next Saturday morning.